Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to the webinar for Church360 members for entering offerings. I will introduce myself here. This is me. I'm Kimberly Moon. I'm with the CTS team here at Concordia, and I'm really happy to be here with you guys this morning. I've been here almost a year. This is my first round of doing webinars. I've done a few for Shepherd staff, and this is my second one for members. So I'm really grateful that I'm working with really wonderful people because I know you'll show me grace when I make a mistake. Just a couple of quick notes. First, all of you are muted. So that question window where you let me know that you could see and hear is where you'll enter any questions that you have. And also note that the session is being recorded, so you will be able to watch it back later if you missed anything or if you have to leave early or anything like that. Note that it's set for an hour, but there's a chance that we may run over to finish everything. If you have to leave, that's okay, because we'll have that recording there for you later. So don't feel like I'm going to be offended or anything. You can leave if you have to, and if you want to stick around, that's wonderful too. Hopefully we'll fit everything in within the hour. Regarding that question window, I clicked up somewhere. This is my boss, Rod. He is a fantastically great source of information and a great help in the webinars. He is here to answer questions that you might pop up in that window. And if at any time there's a question that you put in that we don't get to, we will hopefully have some time at the end for a little question and answer. And even if we don't get all of your questions answered within the webinar, I will reach out after the webinar to make sure that we get everything answered for you so that you don't have any outstanding questions. And just quick note, both of us, there's contact information here on the screen. You can grab a screenshot there if you need to. And here as well. Again, you can always watch it back to get that information if you need to. The session today is on entering offerings. So here's a quick little overview of what we're going to be doing. Our class agenda, we're going to have an outline, our actual discussion of the topics, little quiz. The quiz, don't be stressed about it. It does not actually gauge you, it gauges me and whether I've explained things well. So, and then we'll have that Q&A session time. So here's our little outline. First, we're going to go over funds and envelopes to get us started on how we can do offering entry. And then we'll talk about actually entering offerings. We'll talk about the offering screen and how you can look at the details of the offerings. And we'll talk about Vanco Integration, should you be using that or be wanting to use that. And then we'll go over pledges briefly and contribution statements. And then there's that little quiz. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hide my webcam. So hi, everybody. That way you'll have more screen space to see what's going on. Okay. Now, let's pop on over to members. Okay, so a couple of quick things to note. When we're looking at this screen, this is how Church360 members looks for me. I have an admin login that I'm using for this for the webinar. If you have different login, you might see different things here or not see as many things here. If, for example, you only enter offerings, you might not have access to the people view, the reports view, etc. And that's okay. This will at least give you a view of what everything looks like when you do have full access. Excuse me. So offerings, when you're going to enter offerings, there are two kind of prerequisites that you'll have. You need to have funds to enter the offerings, to categorize the offerings, and you'll need to have a giver set of giver information set up, and we use envelopes as kind of the topic for that, or the category for that. Not everybody has to have envelopes in members, but we'll get to that momentarily. We're going to start first with the funds. And in members, we have a little gear icon up over here in the corner, and that takes us to things that are not under these main categories here. And the funds page is right there under collections, and it's a collection of funds. So you can see here on the screen, there's already some funds set up for this particular database that we're looking at. And quickly, just a little glance, at a glance here, you'll see we have the fund name, the fund number, a color, a couple of little things here that we'll talk about in a moment. And then the amount is the amount that's been given to date within your within your fiscal year. Within this year, and then actions, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. If you notice, we also have some little headings here. There are different categories, and when you first set up your funds, you'll have just one category called uncategorized, and anything that you add will go into there. But you can add a category and then sort these to kind of keep track of your funds in an easier way to see what so that you can see the kinds of funds together that you're interested in. So the main thing that, let me show you real quick how the amount works and how it shows the year to date. You can click on that from in the fund screen and get, for your general fund, as an example, here's a listing of all of the offerings within this year that were for the general fund. And you can see that that starts January to current. And we'll go back to this and I'll show you a little bit more about this little timeline viewfinder thing later. But we'll go back to our funds list. So for any one of your different funds, you can click there to get the details. And you can use that as a report, and you can print it out, and it's all very nice and helpful and handy. So what we're going to do first is let's add a category. So you'll do that here. Just click the little plus sign or the words that say add fund category. And we're going to call this new category, let's see, we're going to call it internal business. Okay, and if you scroll all the way down, you'll see there's that internal business category. Now the next trick is I'm going to say I want this to come a little further up in the page so that I can see it better. So all I did is I grabbed the, there it is, I grabbed the little 6 dots here on the side, I clicked on it, and I moved it up in the list. So you can put your categories or your funds in whatever order you like within your main funds lists. So if you look at, like, let's say I wanted these to be in alphabetical order instead of numerical order or something like that, I can move those around within my category, or I can move something to a different category, which is what I'm about to do with internal business. We're going to put this building fund down here in the internal business category, and we're going to put this capital campaign down in the internal business category. So we can move those all around and make things categorized and organized in the way that makes the most sense for our church. Okay. Now I'm going to show you how to add a fund, which is very similarly simple. We click add fund and we give the fund a name. We're going to call this one the Poinsettia Fund. And we're going to call that, now the colors. Let's talk about that for a second. There's no real reason why you have to have a color for a fund. It's not obviously a category that's of any use in terms of like keeping track of the information or anything, but we give the option for colors because you can, it'll help you to differentiate at a glance when you first look at the color, look at your list, or if you're looking at the offerings, it'll give you kind of an at a glance differentiation between funds. So it's just a simple way to differentiate them, and you could use different colors for different categories, or you could use different colors just to make them make them easy to separate within the category. So there's a lot of options that you have. So the colors, that's pretty much all they're for, is just because it looks nice, and also it helps you to kind of organize things mentally when you're looking at your list. And then numbers are a much more common thing. You're more likely to have fund numbers in other software. So if you note, we have funds all the way through number 14. So we're going to call this one number 15. And I'm going to talk now about something kind of important. There are two little options right here: exclude from statements and non-deductible. They are similar in certain ways and also different. The non-deductible is what you're going to use to make sure that on contribution statements, which are used for tax purposes, you might still want to record that that giving happened, but if there's certain giving that isn't tax deductible, you can't put it in with all the other contributions that are listed on the statement, because then it would be listed as deductible, and then they would be able to make that mistake on their taxes. So we don't want that to happen. So the only way to designate an offering as not being tax deductible is by designating the fund that it's going into as not tax deductible. Now, this poinsettia fund is for Christmas time, and it is for people they use the poinsettias in the Christmas, in the Advent, on the altar and in the church to beautify the church, but then they get to take them home. So they're getting a good, they're getting a product for their gift, and therefore it's not tax deductible. So we've selected that they're non-deductible. That's not necessary to exclude them from statements, because they are still something that we want to see that they gave to. So we're going to save it right here. Now, if I were trying to give from an IRA that was already that was pre-tax, that would also be a thing that's not tax deductible. So I would need to have a fund in here, even if it was for the general fund that they were giving to. You would maybe need to have a separate non-deductible general fund that would tie into whatever you do in your finances as a in the same pot of money. So you might have that, or you might just have a fund called non-deductible IRA giving or something like that. Those are things that still have to be done within the fund. You can't do them from within the offerings entry window. So just keep that in mind. And we're going to go down and look at another one. This one, and we're going to look at how to edit a fund, as well as another little aspect of this. We're going to talk about the exclude. This fund is called VBS fees. This is clearly not an actual offerings fund. It is, I'm paying a fee to the church in order to send my kid to VBS. So in order to, so that's not really, since it's not really giving, it doesn't really belong on the contribution statement, and also it's not tax deductible. So I'm going to click over here on the little pencil icon, and that's going to allow me to edit this one, and I'm going to check that box there so that it won't show up on the contribution statements. Okay, so I've saved that, and if you notice, it's also in the wrong place. It's under memorial funds, and that's not where it belongs. So we're going to once again talk about moving it. So we're going to click the little 6 dots over here, and we're going to move that one up to internal business as well. Well, okay, so we can't. We have to stop a little bit along the way and scroll up a little bit more, and then we can move it up into internal business. Okay. Let's see. Next, we want to talk about Archiving funds. So we've created our poinsettia fund, right? But it's not Christmas time yet. Advent's a long way away, so we don't need it right now. If it was one that I had created last year at Christmas time, I could archive it and then unarchive it when it comes close to Christmas time again later. And it would end up down here. And you can see that this one there's one already down in the archived funds. Now, since this one has only just been created and it doesn't have any giving to it, I can't actually archive it. I can only delete it. So you can delete a fund that's never been used, but you can archive. If it's been used, you can archive a fund. So let's say it was wintertime and it's not going to be time for Vacation Bible School for several months. We could archive this one out of the way. And then when it comes time, when we're getting close to summer and we want to start with Vacation Bible School stuff, we can go down here to where it says archived funds and we can click restore right here and it pops right back up to where it was before. There it is. So we have, the reason you might archive one is because then it won't show up in all of your reports and all of your offering grid. Say you want to make it easier to enter offerings. The things that are not currently in use, you can archive them. And that way, when you go to enter offerings, you have fewer options in the drop-down list to scroll through or to pick from, and it makes it a little quicker. So I wanted to note one other thing. Let's see. Oh, note that this mission fund, which is archived currently, it's also listed as number 1. And the general fund is number 1. If I were to restore that, I would then have 2 number 1s, and it will allow me to do that. So just keep that in mind so that if you archive something and then you create more funds, just make sure that you're paying attention to what the numbers are, especially when you unarchive something. You may need to edit it and give it a new number or give something else a new number so that it can have its old number if you prefer. Okay, the other options you have on the fund screen, you can print, and that'll give you a listing of all of your funds and the amounts. So it's a little report there for everything that you have in your funds list. Or I'm going to click cancel. I can export the list to Excel, and you can see that here. So 2 different views that you can have on that, and it pretty much gives you the same data in either case, but if you need to do some manipulation to that data, you can do that in Excel. Okay. So next, we're going to talk about envelopes. Now, if you are familiar with envelopes, they make perfect sense. When I started here a year ago, I was not familiar with envelopes. My church didn't use them, so it was confusing to me. So just the brief explanation, an envelope number can be assigned to a person so that they can, and they can actually give you physical envelopes and that have the number on there so that when people are entering offerings, it makes it a little easier and more efficient. In members, you can do that, but it's also entirely possible to give without an envelope in members. So if you see here, we have a few envelopes listed for various people, but we also have several people. Some of them are children who just don't give yet, and others are people who give without using an envelope number, and that's totally allowed in members. The actual contributions are tied to your name and not your envelope number. So that makes it a little more flexible, but you can still do reporting or batch entry or various things like that based on a number to make it a little easier if you prefer it that way. So if you look at, say, let's see, I was going to find you one of these. I think Brian Calloway might be one of them that we can look at. And we're going to go look over here. And I will show you more about this later, but we're going to try. Well, let's come back to that later. We'll go back to our envelopes. Okay. So there are various ways you can filter this list so that you can see find who you're looking for. You can type in a name, like for instance, there's Brian Galloway and he's there. You can instead, if you prefer, you can go over here and use some of the pre-existing smart groups that exist. So right now it says everyone, and that's 256 people. If I choose members only, that goes down to 205, and there's a little bit of a change in my list. I can also, let's see, we've got all kinds of different options here. Let's say I wanted to say, let's see, who's on the Board of Education? 7 people, and there they are, and most of them use envelopes. We'll go back to everyone, and I'll show you how you can create a new group like that. If you click these 3 little lines here, you get this black bar where you can add traits to filter your list. So I'm going to click Add Trait, and it usually defaults to who are living, and I'm going to say that's good. We want to see the people that are living because we don't really want to add a new envelope or anything to someone who has already passed. And we're going to click again for a second one, and now instead of living, I want to say envelope. And if you'll see, it defaults to have an envelope number at all. And that seems like a good category to choose from. Okay, so now we see that our total is 134. So out of our 200 and something people, only 134 of them use envelope numbers. Okay, and if I want to, I can save that as a custom smart group. And I can say envelope carriers, people who have an envelope. And I'll save that. And now I can always use that as one of my selections in any part of the software. So, but we are going to go back to everyone so that we can see everyone here. And now if you see that there are options here for a name and a spouse. So it is possible for a married couple to give jointly or separately. And you'll see that there's check boxes here showing David and Shirley Alexander, for example, they contribute jointly and they're on the same line together. Now, let's say Jeffrey and Natalie Alexander were also married and they're on separate lines and they do not contribute jointly. So they might give individually. I think those are actually the children of David and Shirley, but if they were a married couple, they can give separately and that's fine. Now, to contribute jointly, you have to be a married couple, and that's because this is for the contribution statement, IRS tax deduction. That's the point of the giving jointly. So in order to show up on the contribution statement as giving together, you need to be selected as giving jointly, and that's how you can deduct when you're doing your taxes. That's how you can choose your charitable giving tax deductions. So it's not that we don't want you to be able to give jointly with your grandmother or something like that. It's just that that's not a tax combination. So in order to be considered giving jointly, you have to be a married couple. And if you want that to show up, then both members of the couple have to have a profile, an individual profile in members. Let's see. Here's another example of that, and it is right here. Okay. No, different database. Sorry, that's okay. We'll look at this. We'll look at this instead. We're going to go ahead and add an envelope number. So In order to add an envelope number, you must have a person record, and then you'll be listed here. So let's say that we're going to go to Brian. Here we go. We're going back to Brian Calloway. Here he is, and he doesn't have an envelope. He has given in the past. We want to give him an envelope. And note, when I click here, it offers up, hey, 16 is a good number, and that's because 16 is the lowest number that is not already taken. And so it'll always suggest to you what would the lowest number that isn't already taken. So the next available envelope number when you click in the empty box. So I'm going to go ahead and go with that. I'm going to say, yes, I would like that to be his number. And now you'll notice there's a little dot here next to this envelope number. So his current envelope number is still nothing. And then the next envelope number shows as 16. And we've got that little dot showing that that's there and it's the thing that needs to be changed. And we're going to go down and we're going to click apply changes. And it says you are about to apply changes to one envelope in the current envelope column and change the joint contribution status of 0 marriages because Brian has just started college and doesn't have a spouse. So this change will take place immediately and cannot be undone. Just take note of that. And we're going to apply changes. And now you see where it used to be just a dash like this, that his current envelope number is 16. So that's how you would add an envelope. You need to make sure that the person exists in members, and then you come to the envelope screen and you find their name and you just give them a number and you hit apply changes. Now that's for one person at a time, right? So you also, let me do one more. I'm going to say Kelly Calloway. And I'm going to show you here. Let's say that I tried to give her the same number that someone else has. Boop. When I clicked out of the box, it says envelope number 10 is already assigned. So you get a warning. So you know that you're not going to duplicate that number because that would sort of defeat the purpose of having the numbers. So now it says, hey, try 17. So you have that option to follow simple directions, basically, instead of being like me and typing in 10 when you see that there's already a 10 there. So that's how you can do that, and I'm going to apply changes there. You can also make a change to a single person in the same way, like say I wanted, for some reason, I was saving number 16 for somebody else, so I wanted to change Brian to 18. I can do that here in just the same way. It's making that change, apply now it's 18. Okay, now let's say Brian changed his mind again. He doesn't want to have an envelope number at all. So what I would do then is I would delete the number that he has. I would click don't renumber, and I would apply changes. And now it's blanked out so that you can't give him a number. If you want to change that again, you would have to uncheck the box in order to give him a number because he has designated that he doesn't want one. Okay. There's also options to renumber in bulk. You can go down the list and change numbers or add numbers as you wish, just typing them in and then hit apply changes. Or if you look down here on the black bar at the bottom, you can automatically renumber envelopes. And you can do that for everyone, or you can go through and check don't renumber for the ones who don't want to change, or you can use a smart group. You could only change them for members or only change them for the people who already have them or something like that. And that if you filter for that, then it would make those changes when you click renumber only for the ones that are filtered on. So right now we're going to pretend we're going to do it for absolutely everyone, and I'm going to click renumber. And now you see they are all getting new numbers alphabetically starting with 1. And the reason you see this is because Dave Abbott has given on his own and jointly within this year, and that's why he's showing up twice and has two different envelope numbers, but here he is with his spouse. And that can happen sometimes with Vanco. And I'll talk about that briefly when we go over Vanco, or actually I'll just explain it now. Vanco is an electronic online offering option that we integrate with, that we can download the offerings from Vanco into members directly. And if you have that and someone has set up their profile on Vanco as just their own name instead of their name and their spouse's name, and you sync up that information, it can come over and be attributed just to that person if you don't link that up correctly. I'll show you how to link it up later. So if I wanted to continue with this renumbering, I could click apply changes like you've seen me do before, and that little message would say now, this time that you're gonna apply these changes to 256 people and however many marriages there are and all of that. But let's say I say, oh, I didn't really mean to do that to everybody. So I'm gonna click discard changes right here. So now I'm back to where I was before. This is just what everybody's status quo is. I can also click clear all, and that will change everybody to not giving envelopes. If we suddenly decided that we don't want to use envelopes at all in our church, then we could clear them all out like that. But we're not going to do that either. We're going to go ahead and discard changes. And we're going to go back one more time to show you how you can automatically renumber them. And this is what you would normally do like at the year end. If for whatever reason you wanted to renumber everyone for next year, you could use that option. You can also change what you want to start with. If you wanted to start with 100 instead of 1 or whatever, you can do that. But you click your renumber, and then you can go over here and click schedule renumbering. And it'll say that, and it says renumber 207 envelopes and change the contribution status of 0 marriages on, and then it'll put a date in here, but you can change this date for whenever you think is appropriate. So let's say that in a certain year, the Sunday is in the middle of the week. Like let's say that, or the Sunday is in the middle, is not at the beginning of the month, like this one. So let's say this was your first Sunday in the, this was your first Sunday, and so you didn't want to start renumbering on the first because the first was actually before the Sunday. Then you could change it to sometime after. Or if you think you need a couple of weeks to get everything sorted before you start entering under the new numbers, you could put it all the way down here. So you can do that however you'd like. And if you click save, then you'll notice you have some new options that show up here. You're not going to click discard. You're not going to get anywhere with discard changes because you've already created a schedule. So it's not just changes, it's changes and a time frame. So you can't use that, but you can use delete schedule renumbering, or you can use this back button. So delete means I changed my mind, I don't want to schedule the renumbering at all, and back means, oh, I forgot to put in the date that I wanted, or I wanted to give this one person who always uses the same number, make sure that they're staying on the same number. So I click back, I can do my edits, and then I can, there we go, click edit schedule renumbering. I can make my changes, and then I can say save schedule renumbering, and it'll say it again. There's the date, I click save, and it says changes saved. Now, I still need to, whoops. Okay, so then when I go to enter offerings now, they will still have these numbers, but on this date, it will automatically change so that when I go to enter offerings, these will be the people's numbers. So we will once again not do that. And if you notice, actually, before I go, there's this back button. There's also back right here, which is also clickable. So you have two different ways to go back in and edit it before you're done. So we will delete. Okay. Let's see. Another thing to note in Oh, another thing to note about the discard changes button. It only works before you've clicked apply changes. Once you've clicked apply changes, there's no undoing it, it's done, and you'll have to manually undo it or change it however you need to. Okay. All right, so now that we have figured out our envelope situation and we have our funds all sorted out, we can actually enter some offerings. And we're going to do that over here under the offerings tab. We'll come back a little bit. We're first going to show a little bit about the actual offering screen. First thing is you have this little viewfinder that's it's a timeline, and then you also have this up here that you can set the times on. Note that your range can't be more than 18 months, but it can be 18 months back from now, or it can be 18 months back from, like, your start and end date just have to be within 18 months of each other. It doesn't have to be up until right now. As you can see, we've got a future date as our end date up here, but down here on the timeline, it's only going to go to today because it knows that you don't really have anything in the future. So, but you can scroll. There's this little grabby bar right here to focus in. You can narrow it down. I only want to see stuff that's happened in June. Now it says June 1st. It still says to October 27th because that's what was added up here, but you can see down here that we're only actually going to here. Or if I wanted to go back further, I can see a lot more by scrolling it that way. And we'll go with the narrower focus in June. So you can also filter this view by what you want to see, which is offerings or summaries. Here's a summary by fund of everything in that giving range. So that's everything that's been given in the date range that was selected. Here's the average. There's any pledges that are set up for that date range. And here we go. Now I can also do summaries by giver, and then I get the people's names and what they've given in the date range. And so that's how you can filter for what you want to see. And then you can also over here filter for who you want to see. Everyone or just members or any combination of subgroup, any subgroup or smart group that you have set up, you can see just their giving. So we looked at the Board of Education earlier, and that was 7 people. Here's their giving for this time frame. We'll go back to everyone. Now there's one other special way that you can filter in the offerings grid that's pretty unique, and that is by clicking on certain categories in the grid. So I can click on a person, and now I have filtered for just that giver. And I said person, but I mean giver, and giver can be either an individual or a couple that gives jointly. So I clicked on Robert and Betty Calloway, and now I can see all of their giving within this time frame. I can also do the same kind of filtering. I'm going to click the X to unfilter, and now I'm back to all of the people. I can do the same kind of filtering by the fund. So let's say I want to filter for the general fund. Now I've got all of the giving for the general fund within that time frame. So I'm going to click that X to get rid of that filter. And the other thing that I can use the click filter for is the type of giving. So there are 4 types of giving that you can choose from: cash, check, electronic, or gifts in kind. So let's say I'm trying to figure out a Vanco thing. Somebody says they gave a certain amount on by Vanco on a certain date. I might click on electronic, and then look, that will kind of narrow it down for me to just electronic payments. Let's say it was Sally Baxter, who's trying to figure out what's going on. So we click on her name as well. Now we filtered for all electronic payments given by Sally Baxter within this time frame. So we can do any combination of those 3 clicks. So let's say we want to do anything that the Callaways gave to the Benevolence Fund by electronic offering. And there we go. Now we filtered all the way down just to this one offering. So that is your click filters that you can use within the offering screen, and it makes things a lot simpler. You can also, do you see when I move the mouse how there's little sections that turn kind of a peachy color, and those indicate that that's a batch. So it's a chunk of giving that was done together. So most often you'll have like a bigger batch for, say, the Sunday morning worship service where people have brought in their checks and cash or whatever and put it in the plate. That's what you'll see. This is the batch for June 5th, 8 a.m. worship service. Now these smaller batches, these are likely to be Vanco offerings that were done electronically, and those get batched up just by the day that they were received, the day and time that they were received. So you can also select just a batch and go in, and I'll show you that a little bit more in a minute because I want to first show you how to do a batch. So in order to create a batch, you just go up here and you click the new batch button, which seems like a reasonable thing to do. And you'll note that you can put in the date. We're going to put in Sunday's worship service batch. So we're going to choose the date for Sunday. And then we're going to say, yes, that was the 8 a.m. worship service. We're going to click add. And this is our batch entry screen, which means this is the screen where we're going to enter all of our offerings from that day. We are now going to start with the loose offerings. We're going to say, obviously, those were cash. So if you click here, you'll see you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are your offering types. You've got cash, check, electronic, and then gifts in kind is represented by a little truck. And a gift in kind is when instead of money, I'm giving an item. Like say I donate a projector for the worship service or something like that, that would be a gift in kind. So it's represented by a truck because somebody might donate a truck. So we're saying loose offerings, we assume those always go to the general fund, and we'll say that those are, we got $121 in loose offerings that day. Then on the next row, I can either use that scroll in my mouse and select a person. So let's say Darren Belton gave a check. So I click there. That's an option number 2. And I put in a check number. And that is, let's say, $1,500. And he's giving to the general fund. And he's giving $100. So I can enter a memo there that says, I don't know, we'll call it memo. And obviously that's not what you would put there, but you know, whatever kind of information that you wanted to have associated with that gift, you could do that there. And then I go down to, and I hit enter, and that took me to the next one. Now let's say that I want to do this just for the people who have envelope numbers and I want to use the keyboard only. I can just type in using my number pad, envelope number 112, James and Aaron Collins, and I can hit enter on my little number pad and it'll jump right over to the thing that has the payment types, and that is why, sorry about that. That's why they have numbers. You can select, or you can, whoops, I've selected it, but you can use your keyboard, but I can't now because I clicked away. To select that it was also a check, then you can hit enter and hop over here and enter the check number. It's 225 and hit enter, and I'll take you over here, and I can say that is for the education fund and hit enter again and put in my amount, $75 to the education fund. And I have, of course, messed up this over here. Let me type that back in, James and Aaron Collins. There we go. check. Okay. So they have given $75 to the education fund, and I can go down to do the next one. Now let's say the next one is 102, our friend Sally Baxter. She is giving a check as well. So I select number 2 and I hit enter. Her check is 114 and I hit enter. Now here's a new thing to let you know. You can say 1 for general fund and put in an amount. Let's say that she actually gave a check for $200. She wants to, forgive me for that, the Slack messages. I don't think I have Slack open, but it's still popping up. So she wants to give, her check is for $200, but she wants to give $100 to the general fund and then the rest to other funds. So she's giving her $100 to the general fund. Then instead of dropping down to a new person, I can say she also wants to give $50 to the benevolence fund and $50 to the building fund. So her $200 check is one check with one check number, but it's been given to 3 different funds. And then when I hit enter, that applies them all. And if you notice, every time I hit enter, these colors show up, that they're the colors that are assigned to the funds. And that helps you know that that's been saved. So while you're entering the batch is actually being saved. You don't have to even, there's not even a button to click save when you're finished. These all are already applied now. So let's say this is my whole batch. I don't have any more to do. I'm done. And if you look down here, you can see that there's a little running subtotal and it shows you kind of the different funds that the giving went to and the giving types and the totals for each one and the overall total here. You can now either go to print yourself like a batch report that'll give you all of that information plus that little grid, or you can go to download if you want and get just the details into Excel or as a CSV, either way. So you see that that one doesn't have the separate little grid, but that's because you can easily total it from here. I'll show you that. All of the information is there, so I could do my totals this way, or sort them by fund and then do my totals that way, or however I wanted to do that. So you have options within for how you want to save that information. Either print it and or save it, or download it to Excel. You also, if you could say, oh my gosh, I did this all entirely wrong, I could delete it. Or somebody already entered this and I didn't realize it. Oh, I can get rid of it all here. Or I can say, oh my gosh, you know what? I got the information wrong up here, the date or the event. So I can click edit here, and I can either say, oh, like if I had a different event, if there was a 10:30 worship or whatever, I could change to that. Or I could say this was actually for the 5th, but we know it's really not. So we're going to just not do that. We're going to close without saving. Notice there's also the total of the batch listed up here at the top. So those are your options within the batch screen. Now, if I go to offerings, I will find those June 12th offerings. I click back over here. Now, if you see when I hover my mouse over, those are all highlighted in peach, and that's how you know that they are a batch together. Now, once you have a group that's highlighted in peach, if you click on one of the blank parts of that peach block, so like don't click here because that will take you to a person, but click say here, that'll take you right back into the batch where you can delete it or edit it or add to it as you like. So that's one of the options. And now within the batch entry screen, we talked a little bit in funds about the kinds of giving that are not tax deductible and how you would handle those. Again, here, if you've got an offering, or if you've got money that's come in that you're going to enter through the offerings, but it's not tax deductible, there's not a way in here to designate that it's not tax deductible other than selecting the fund that is not tax deductible. So for instance, like I talked about, our poinsettia fund, that one's not tax deductible. So that's how I would indicate that Dave and Shirley Alexander are giving $50 to the poinsettia fund. That's how we know that that $50 out of all of the giving from Shirley and David is not tax deductible. So that's how you do that. Let's see. Oh, within, let's go back into there. I showed you how to edit the actual batch just now, but I didn't show you how to edit an individual offering. So let's say that Darren actually gave $200 and not $100. All I had to do, I'm gonna click out of it, click the X here. All I had to do was click on the line that had that offering, and that brought it into an edit mode. And so now I can either change it and say it wasn't really Darren who gave it, or I can change his check number or his payment type. I could change the fund, and I can change the amount. So he actually gave 200, and in the memo, I'm going to change it to corrected amount. And I'm going to click save, and now you see that the total updated here and the total updated down here and up here. So, excuse me, take a drink of water here. I mentioned about printing and downloading. Just make sure you do that. You want to have a record of it so that if it gets edited later, you can kind of compare. So once you've edited it, you probably want to do it again. Okay, so back to the offerings view. There are a few little action buttons up here. You can download from the offerings view, just like you can from anywhere else, to Excel. Pop up your little list, and it'll show all of the offerings and a little extra detail, like a giver ID. That's part of how we identify things in the database, as opposed to the name of the envelope number. You don't necessarily need that, but it's something that members needs to categorize things. But you have all of that data there. You can, of course, also print and get that list. That looks more like your view. And then if you had filtered for, let's say we did members, and we did only by check, and we did only to the building fund, and we wanted to save this so that I could look at it anytime I wanted to. I can click save report, and I can name that report, and then it'll be something that I can come back to anytime that I want. So that's how you would create a report for it. We are running long, so we're at 10:53, and I've got quite a bit to go. So again, if you are running out of time and have to go, I won't be offended, and this is recorded, so you'll still be able to watch the end. So I just want to let you know about that ahead of time so that you don't feel guilty if you have to leave us at some point. So now we're going to go to Vanco Integration. So that's also under the little gear, and that's not a collection. That's under Admin down here at the bottom section, and that's Vanco Integration. This is what you can see here. And when you first set this up, you'll be getting information from Vanco. So this is, again, a company that helps nonprofits take in donations, and we have an integration with them into members so that we can automatically receive those funds that are given into Vanco. So you'll get these. This up here is to set up a new Vanco connection, but we already have one here. So basically it would be the same thing. The client ID is what this is here for our little test situation. You would get all of this information from Vanco when you set up doing business with them, and then you can put this information in, and it'll be a client ID, a user ID, a password. All of that will be set up with you in Vanco, and you would click add, and it would be here. This obviously is already active and has been in use, and you can see that you can delete it by going here, or if you just click on it, you can edit it, or you can click this Sync Now button. Now that's to pull down any offerings that are there from Vanco right now. You don't necessarily need to do that because the system, once you have it set up, once it's synced for the first time, I'm going to go ahead and click the X because we're not really going to edit that. It will download automatically every, I think, hour or 2 hours during the day. So you don't have to worry about it. Once you've set it up, you can more or less forget it, except if you get a little message like this that says, hey, we see that Vanco Sync has completed, and you have offerings from unmatched givers and unmatched funds. So we see down here, we have 2 unmatched funds. So if we click on that, we can go over here and we can see, hey, look, the building fund says it's not yet matched to a members fund. Well, this is the Vanco building fund, and we haven't set it up so that our system knows that building fund in Vanco means building fund here. So if I click on it, it becomes a drop down, and I can select my building fund there. And now it knows when I click link that when I say building fund, I mean building fund. Or when the people give to what's called the building fund in Vanco, it means building fund here. So the same thing here, general fund. If I click on it, I can say, hey, that means the general fund, and I can link them. And now if we go back to that offering screen, you'll see before there were some that had a dash, and that was because they were electronic offerings that came through Vanco, and they were to those funds that hadn't yet been synced. Now they're synced, and you don't see that dash anymore. You see the actual fund that it's synced to. So that's another thing to take note of. I showed you how to edit a batch, and you can make changes to the individual offerings. You can change who gave, you can change the fund, the amount, etc. With Vanco offerings, so let's see this one right here. If you notice, these are not clickable. The only thing you can change is the memo line, and that's because this is giving that came through Vanco. It wasn't entered manually. It shouldn't be incorrect. So if you ever have something with Vanco that, say you hear from Vanco, hey, this offering, this transaction failed, or this transaction, whatever, you won't be able to delete it manually. You'll need to either get with them or get with us, depending on the kind of transaction and what happened, in order to get it cleared off if it was wrong, or changed if it was wrong. That's rare, but if it happens, you can always give us a call, or talk to Vanco if they have, if there's something that they have to do. But we can work with you on those. So back over to the Vanco integration, similar to the funds that we looked at, you can also see we have this thing that we have unmatched givers. So we click match, and some of the people who gave might not show up. So we say like Chris Gibson. Well, let's see, he's not one of ours. We can't pick him, let's say, or we can see. Aha, it's not Chris, it's Christy. That's why. So we'd select her, and then we'd link that, and now we know that that things that came from Vanco under that name are actually for Christy. So that's how we link them up. That's how you do the sync. It's pretty basic from our end because you have to actually work with Vanco to get it first set up to get the login information. Okay, so let's move on real quick to pledges. We are going under collections and clicking pledges again. I have one pledge set up so that you can see what it looks like. And it's a pledge from David and Suzanne Abbott for $100 a week. And it starts on May 15th through December 31st. And it is to the general fund and it shows the given to date amount. Now let's say I wanted to add another one. I'm going to do that up here. I'm going to select my giver. We're going to say that Melissa Clayton is going to give $50 every other week. And we're going to pretend that she started all the way back in January, but we just now managed to put in our, and it's going to be for the full year. And she's giving to, this is a special pledge for the education fund. And I click add pledge, simple as that. Now on the screen here, we see just very few because we've got it filtered to show only active pledges. If I click all, it'll show pledges from the past that have already been completed. So you can see absolutely everything. Obviously, most of the time, I only want to look at the active pledges. So I can also edit that pledge. I can say, whoops. Oh, there we go. I can say, whoops, that wasn't actually supposed to be for, there we go. That wasn't actually supposed to be for $50. It was supposed to be for $20. And I can click save. Okay, and we can see how down here that her given to date is 0. If I go and add an offering, then that will be updated the next time I look at it. If I go back, I'm going to unclick this. Just like in the offering screen, I clicked on her name, which made it filter for her. I can unclick that, and it'll refresh, and then it'll show all of the ones that I've got. Now let's look at this magic because it does calculate automatically. If some of you used to use Shepherd Staff, you'll know that you had to actually run a little utility to update sometimes to make the pledge, the given to date match if you created a pledge after the fact or something like that. But let's edit this one. We're going to click on it. We're going to say this one started at the beginning of the year as well. And take note when I click save that given to date now has changed to include all of the money that they gave before May. So that updates automatically. So that's some of the basics on pledges. You also obviously have the export, you can export to Excel and you can print just like on all of the other ones. Let's move on real quick to the contribution statement so we don't go over too long. Whoops, sorry. We're going to go over to people and we're going to switch to givers. And I'm just going to pick a handful here. Let's see. I'm just going to pick those 3 so that it doesn't take forever to generate. So, but you could filter any way you want, and you can narrow it down to just certain people or whatever. Like earlier, we had that. We created one. We created this smart group of just people who have envelopes. We could select that, anything like that. And if you want to select a whole group, you can click this button, but I just clicked the certain checkboxes that I needed. And I'm going to go to download. And I'm going to choose contribution statements. And on this box that pops up, you see that you have a lot of different options that you can choose from. You can put a date range. You can put last year, which will do all of last year. You can do this year, which will do this year to date, or you can manually put in dates that you want. You can select to generate empty statements if they didn't give any during the year. I'm not sure why you would do that, but you might want to for some specific reason. You can also click on this second tab to customize, and you can choose different things to give, to include. So in this instance, you can include an itemized list. You can include a summary as well. You might put your church logo. As you can see right here, ours is a cupcake right now on our little test system. And you also have an IRS message saying, hey, no goods or services were provided. That's to make sure that they have the right information for taxes. There's also a spot for a personal message that you would send out to your givers with your statements. So you can either do from here, generate PDF as if you're going to use a PDF and print it out or attach it to an email or whatever, or you can actually just do emails here if they have an email address. So if I click that, it'll show me, okay, well, I've got email addresses, but David and Shirley don't have one. So I could either generate a PDF or I can send. So I'm going to go ahead and generate PDFs for these people and click download, and then you'll be able to see the statements that we've generated, and that's through this date within 2022. And you can see it shows the information here. This, because they have a pledge, David and Suzanne, you can see that pledge information. You can also see what they've given and to the different funds, and everything is there. If they had something that was non-deductible, it would show on the fund as on the sheet as being non-deductible. If I keep scrolling down, I get to the next person. So here's David and Shirley Alexander and their giving, and then here's Sally Baxter and hers. So pretty straightforward, very simple to generate these. You just go to download and choose contribution statement once you've selected your people. And then you put in your date range and what you want to show up on the statement, and you generate it. Okay. Let's pop back over here then and try our quiz. If anybody's still with us. True or false, to mark any contribution as non-tax deductible, click a checkbox in the batch entry screen. I'm going to pop up that poll, let you guys select your answer. There we go. Okay, close the poll. And we will move on to the answer. False. You can designate funds as non-tax deductible, but not individual offerings. So any contribution attributed to the fund will be included in the contribution statement, but it will be designated as non-tax deductible. So if you are on the batch entry screen, what you do is you select the fund that is non-tax deductible. And if there isn't one for the category of giving that you're trying to give, then you need to create a new fund. Basically, you can't just select from within the batch entry screen. You can't. There's not a box to check. Okay, next one. Let's give you the second one here. When entering offerings, you can select one person and payment type, but split the offerings between multiple funds. True or false? Okay. I'll close the poll. True. When you're entering an offering for a person, you can split up the total amount they gave across multiple funds. If they give with multiple payment types, however, that will have to be a separate offering record. So like if they gave some cash and they gave a check, or if they whatever, those would be separate, but funds you can split up between any one giving amount. Okay, next. This is a multiple choice one. On the offering screen, you can click to filter by which fields, and I'm gonna pop that one up there. By giver, by fund, by payment type, or all of the above. Okay, I'm going to close that one out. And the answer is D, all of the above. You can filter offerings by all these different fields to help you prepare reports, not only in the offerings view, but also in the summaries by fund and summaries by giver view. Okay. And one more. To be listed on the same envelope and giving jointly, a couple must be married. True or false? And I'm launching that poll now. Okay. Close Closing that poll, and yes, the answer is true. For tax purposes, a couple can only give together if they're listed as each other's spouse. You can add someone as a spouse either within their person record or directly from the envelope screen. Okay. Any questions that haven't been answered or that you need some help with? Let's see. Looks like Rod has been on a roll answering questions. So are there any new questions or anything that hasn't quite been answered? Okay, it looks like nothing new is popping up, and okay, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. Thanks so much for attending the webinar. Thank you for your patience and your grace. I hope you enjoyed the session. Here's our contact information if you have any questions after the fact, 1-800-346-6120. And you can reach us by email at support@cts.cph.org. And one other option you might have, within members, you can click this little icon down here and either do some searching or start a chat or send us a message from right within members. So any questions you have can always be answered one way or another. And I'll go back to, okay. So everybody, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend after tomorrow. And I hope the summer is not melting you. You all have a great afternoon. Thanks.